We had 10 bodies in the theater. We had a number of people dead at the hospital. We had untold numbers of people shot.
Obviously, you're going to get emotion when there's such a loss of life, especially such precious children that were lost that day.
There was a total of 19 students that were stabbed, and they were puncture wounds or slashings.
We received a call within 60 seconds of the incident that a shooting had occurred in the airport.
I was grabbed by a detective from the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department. He informed me that there was an active shooter at the Washington Navy Yard.
Hassan fired about 146 shots inside and 76 shots outside.
Well, the shooting itself was over in 5 seconds. A total of 5 rounds were fired.
I was shot 3 times and was one of the most critically injured survivors from the shooting.
I responded to Sandy Hook Elementary School for the shooting that occurred there. When I first arrived on scene, there was a lot of chaos with, just law enforcement throughout the area. The area was pretty well jammed with cars, so it was difficult to get in and out of there.
The difference between a military base and civilians is that it seemed most of the soldiers were trying to engage and trying to help, and so they're running towards the gunfire.
It was an absolutely chaotic scene. I also know that the fire service, they were overwhelmed outside the theater when they arrived, and hundreds of panicked and some injured people descended upon the fire folks, the fire crews. If you run into an event where there is mass casualties, your absolute first obligation is to eliminate the threat. If the best available information you have as you respond is that the shooter is on the 4th floor killing people, then you got to get to the 4th floor, and you got to get there in a hurry. You can't be doing a slow clear of the 1st floor. That may require you to step over people who are critically wounded to address the threat.
Our big concern that day was to get into that school as fast as we could. All 3 of us had our bulletproof vests in our cars. None of us put them on.
When I arrived at the scene, the shooting had stopped, but the chaos was still there. Not knowing how the individual who came with a gun got to the airport, whether there was a vehicle that was parked in one of our lots with an explosive device in it or some other or something else, and whether or not there was another individual that was laying off that may start opening fire once your resources begin to converge on the one terminal.
And then immediately after we arrived, somebody said second shooter because we heard gunshots, and unfortunately they were practicing a funeral about 4 blocks away, so they're firing blanks.
In numerous situations, you will have reports of second and third shooters, and as we know, this is oftentimes not the case. But as we sometimes have responders, first responders who are not wearing law enforcement gear, they may be mistaken for second and third shooters.
I remember feeling for a very short time that what we had here was almost overwhelming with the situation we faced. And with our officers, there weren't enough. I got on the police radio and I began to call for assistance from local police departments, surrounding police departments. We had crime scene coming. Pennsylvania State Police came.
I made 2 phone calls right away. The first phone call I made was to my city manager, my boss. I told him what was going on, and then I picked up the phone and I called the Denver field office of the FBI. I called the SAC, and I explained what we had and that I needed every bit of resources that they could bring to bear.
Much kudos to the FBI because we did not even call the FBI, but they showed up. The supervisor agent came up to me and wanted it to be very clear that he wasn't there or they weren't there to take over the investigation, that they would help us in any way they could. State police was the same way. Establish those relationships with fellow law enforcement agencies from the federal to the local levels because you will need it, and that way you don't become overwhelmed with the task at hand.
You had to have that difficult conversation. That's not always easy to have. Who's in charge? While there was a lot of people there, and very high-level people, everybody was there for the right reason, and they realized, okay, state police are in charge of the criminal investigation, but we're all going to bring whatever we can and resources together to get the job done.
We have crossover with the fire EMS people very often, and they do come under our unified command. There's no issue at all. When we get to the scene of calls, we all understand what we're doing here.
And the unified command set up in the library with the FBI and the state police, and the governor even came. having everybody there to discuss and lay out the plans on how to recover the evidence, electronic evidence and everything like that, things started to fall in place.
Before you could even realize what was going on, we had over 500 officers in our airport looking for work and looking for something to do.
We did have a whole lot of cops show up, and we had to figure out what to do with them. But that is a priority in your leadership, is to make sure that the folks who respond check in, get assignments, or go to a standby area until you need them.
The fire department does a very nice job of rolling into incidents. They come generally from a fire station. They park nicely. They put their tarps out, and they are very, very organized. Police officers don't work that way. They will park on lawns. They will park on top of each other. They're cattywampus. They just want to get to to wherever it is they need to go.
To keep the pathway for vehicular traffic for emergency vehicles, specifically ambulances who are coming there to get the victims out, played a critical part in getting these victims to the ambulances and to the hospitals, to the trauma units, to get them help.
It took more hours to clear off the central terminal area of emergency vehicles, police and fire and others, FBI vehicles also, than it really should have. In fact, we couldn't even find the owners and drivers of some of the vehicles, and we ultimately were towing police vehicles to a parking structure just to get them out of the way.
If there's a lesson for the American Police Service and the Fire Service, it is that we have to be better at getting to the wounded with critical care and getting them out of warm zones.
Our ability to be able to provide force protection in a relatively short period of time, to be able to have officers taking the injured to a marshaling area in that warm zone and being able to have the firefighters treat the individuals is a relatively new concept.
We did what they call a warm zone clearing. We were at the patient's side by video. Again, we have this all on video within 4.5 to 5 minutes of the call. Even the trauma surgeons have told us that made the difference, at least in one of the persons surviving this event.
Our police officers managed to locate some buses from the local bus authority, and we convinced hundreds of these witnesses to get on buses and go to a local high school and be interviewed.
There was 23,000 people in the airport. About 1,000 of them were in the terminal when the incident occurred and became part of our witness management issues. I was able to put one of my assistant chiefs in charge of that particular aspect of it because it was a large piece to handle.
I would say well over 100 people needed interviewed. The FBI, state police, and other people went out and interviewed these victims at the hospitals. But without the local police departments helping us, we would quickly have been overwhelmed.
I think that one of the biggest roles for a police department in the aftermath of an event like this is managing the victims and providing every possible service to them. We mobilized the resources of the victim advocate community in Colorado, by the way, including the victim advocates who worked for the Denver field office of the FBI. And we assigned to every family a victim advocate to manage their issues and concerns.
And you have to always be honest with them and always keep them first and foremost in how you do things going forward.
No one can be prepared for the media crush that comes with this event. I got back to my office at 5:36 in the morning, and I see 187 unanswered phone calls. My PIOs couldn't use their 2 phones for about 12 hours because all they did was ring.
The media is going to be such a critical part of what's going on with you. Give them what you can, and don't allow them or don't give them the time to create this story.
All our decisions with regard to how to handle the media, a critical advisor and a partner in handling that was the SAC from Denver and his press expert. We also had in the room for those critical decisions the district attorney, and the United States attorney was very helpful. And by the way, the attorney general for Colorado was there.
Our incident occurred after the Boston bombing at the Boston Marathon. They relied heavily on social media and Twitter and pushing a lot of information out. We did that also, but we didn't address the reporters and their cameras as quickly as we probably should have. In most cases, there's a tremendous amount of information and lessons learned on the totality of an incident, and that's where it's critical that every agency complete a detailed after-action report. It's going to be painful, I can promise people. Get ready for that pain, but in the end, it's part of our duty, and it's the right thing to do.
If there is a criticism, and it came out in the after-action report, it's that we didn't establish unified command between police and fire early enough. It would have been better had we had the person in command of fire and the person in command of police meeting face-to-face and sharing information sooner than we did. That didn't occur to around the 50-minute mark. It would have been nice if it occurred sooner, and it's a fair criticism.
The one thing that I would have done differently going forward would have been, prior to us closing down that command post, had a clear plan for everybody involved going forward, because there was definitely some loss of communication for a short time period for the couple weeks following.
I got caught up into a lot of the operational issues that were going on that particular day, and essentially I wanted to play. I wanted to be a part of the unified command. I wanted to be a part of that particular incident. What I learned was I needed to step back. I needed to step out of the unified command and be more of an agency executive, and to deal with the much broader airport issues that were there. If I had to do it all over again, I would give a press conference within the first 45 minutes of the incident. We clearly had an understanding of what happened by then.
I'm a passionate believer after this event that cops have to be trained, that there's an inevitability to this, that they have to have a mindset that this absolutely could happen to you and your agency.
To officers entering a space or a room where there are victims, I would say, please try to acknowledge us, even if you have to step over us, because there's just a lot of fear on our end. And so for you to stop and say, I see you, I'm going to come back for you, is very empowering. Keep saying your name. The only reason I remember my paramedics and Patrick's name are because they kept repeating it to me. And there's a sense of, I think, connection and humanity in that was very hopeful. You're giving us hope at that point. Most people's interaction with police is being, I guess, stopped at a traffic stop or hearing negative media accounts. But I can't deny that these 40 people ran into this building and saved us. I'm going to get emotional, sorry. So there's nothing but gratitude.